Hey everybody, we're the Board Buds, and today we're talking about Arcs, a game by Cole World with art by Kyle Farron. In Arcs, you and up to 3 other players are going to be vying for control of a decaying empire's galaxy, fighting for resources as well as political intrigue. In the expansion, the Blighted Reach, you control an empire across 3 different games, and you'll be chasing down specific goals, all in order to get the most points at the end of the game. So, what stood out to you as the most interesting thing about Arcs?
I think the most interesting thing is probably the action mechanic of kind of a trick-taking game with 4 different suits, and each suit has different actions associated with it. And the way that works is kind of whoever leads the suit plays their card and gets however many pips of actions are on it. So usually, like the lower numbers, like a 2, will have 4 or so pips, whereas the higher numbers usually only have 1. And then each suit has a number of different actions you can do on it. So it might be like a move, a fight, and tax or something. And you can do those in any combination for the number of pips you have. And then if people can beat you by following suit, they can do their full pips. But if they can't, they only get one action and can either copy your suit to do one of the actions from that card, or not copy your suit, play whatever they want, but still only get 1 pip, but to do something they want instead.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting mechanic. I can't say I've seen anyone else really do a trick-taking game that wasn't just about winning tricks. So there's definitely an interesting system there, especially with how the lower the number, the more actions they get to take, but the easier it is for somebody to pass you. So it's pretty interesting on if you're going to do lower actions to try and keep the lead, or do more actions but open yourself up. But part of that is also, there's some ways to kind of mitigate that. You can forcibly take control of a trick by discarding an extra card, which will essentially give you 1 less turn, but it can give you control, which will then lead to more actions, or being able to use that to declare certain victory conditions. So one of the things with that is, if you're the lead, you can declare the victory condition on your card, and at the end of the round, that'll be scored for points. But doing so sets your number to 0, which makes it easier for people to surpass you. So it's kind of tied in with that whole aspect of, when you want to do that, and what victory conditions you want to chase.
Yeah, all of that stuff I think is super interesting. I really like the player-defined scoring for each round, and you can even declare the same scoring condition for all 3 of the scoring conditions for a round, because each round up to 3 conditions can be chosen. But if you or everyone can choose the same one each time, or for all 3, so that one thing will be just score all the points in a round. So I really like that. That's super interesting to me. A slight negative with that is you need specific cards to declare the scoring condition you want, which can kind of not feel the best, and there's not really any way around that, I don't think.
Yeah, there's not really a way outside some very specific cards that might come up in the deck that really can get around that. So if you don't see the victory condition in your hand, you just won't be able to declare that unless someone else does. So you kind of have to pivot around that. I think that is something about this game, is it feels very much like you're, well, you might have some long-term plans. You're really making the best of the moment to go about that, because, even if you build kind of a big army or something, a lot of ships, if you don't see that card, in order to declare, the military victory for winning fights, you might have to pivot into just using those ships to gather resources and win a resource, the resource victory. So a lot of options. I know some of the guys that we play with don't super like that, how the hand can play out like that. So that might be a pain point for some people.
It's not really a negative to me. I don't super mind it because this is a really swingy game, I think. And I'm okay with that. And even if you don't get to declare what you want for one round, you either should have pivoted or should pivot, or the next round you'll be able to, and it will probably be fine anyways. I think you mentioned the discarding an extra card to take control. I think we very much undervalued that the first couple times we played it because it seems bad because you're having one less turn, but chances are if you needed to do it, that one less turn was going to be a one action turn anyways. So if you discard it, you can probably play something that will give you 3-4 actions, and really you'll end up with more actions even though it'll be less turns.
Yeah, and something else to note there, a lot of our games were with 3 people. If you do play with 4, that'll add in a 1 in 7 card, which will change it a little bit. I believe with the 7s, you'll be able to seize the initiative, whereas the 1s, I believe, let you declare a number of the different victory conditions. So there is a little bit of a change there depending with how many players that you play with. But with 3 people, how we normally play, those aren't in play, so it could change a bit there.
Yeah, we've done the base the normal base game with 4 a few times, and then the campaign we've played with 3 every time we've done it, just as where we're coming from with this stuff.
Yeah, so I guess we could talk about the campaign a bit here, which I think is the more interesting way to play. So with the campaign, each player will kind of start with basically their own faction of various space creatures that all have kind of their own individual strength and ability. And with that, they'll have their own goal that they want to accomplish throughout the game. So you'll actually be looking at both doing your goal and trying to get the most points that you can in order to set yourself up. So you'll play across 3 games, and if you keep completing your goal for your race will get stronger and get more abilities. But if you fail, you actually will get to choose a different race and be able to try different strategies. And part of the way that it's balanced is that the races that you get to choose from in game 2 and in game 3 are actually stronger, so you're not necessarily, swapping over to a base level, power. You'll have some more interesting abilities. So what did you think about kind of, the different races that were available to play?
I think they're all really cool and interesting. They all seem pretty different, not necessarily in the abilities that they have, though some of them are, especially the third round ones, but we can talk about that in a minute. But their goals, I think, pushes you in very different ways and makes you try very different strategies. And I really have liked that so far.
Yeah, definitely. And part of the difference between the base game is that a lot of these will add, different rules that go into this rule book that you'll have that change kind of how the game is played. Or usually we'll add something, with the mechanic just around the person's ability. I think one of the games we played with a Commonwealth where we all ended up having to join this Commonwealth, and then because we were all in it, we couldn't fight each other. So it can really do some interesting things. And it seemed like there was a good variety where you're not necessarily going to have the same combination every time.
Yeah, the Commonwealth one was pretty fun. I believe I was the Commonwealth and wanted not to fight each other because I was pretty weak and just trying to kind of play a passive resource-driven game. So forcing everyone into the Commonwealth, and then I think it was a certain way to make it not allowed to fight if a certain card was out, but trying to keep that in place so I wasn't getting destroyed by much larger armies was fun. I also like that, like you said, each faction has a goal for each round, and if you meet the goal, you're allowed to switch you still get a chance to switch a faction if you want. So if you don't like whatever faction you got the first time around, you can pivot if you're not enjoying it or you don't think it's going to work out. But if you don't meet it, even if you want to keep it, you're not allowed, which I enjoy that as well.
Yeah, and I also found that keeping your faction, change it up enough that it didn't just feel like you were playing the same person again. It kind of evolved in a way that made sense, where you've accomplished your goals and now you're looking to do something else. Maybe I think with the golems that I had played, the first round I was collecting these golems, and then the second game, those golems would be used to like spread knowledge. So it changes the mechanics in that way while still keeping some of the original mechanics around. So it can be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The faction's goals evolve in a logical way. Like, we've accomplished what we tried, so now we're doing this next step of our plan to what we want. Like the Commonwealth one, I think the first round, their goal was just to protect the free cities from getting destroyed. And then the second round, you then formed the Commonwealth and got everyone in it. And then I don't think I managed to get them to the third round, so I don't know what happened there.
It's also kind of interesting that if you do choose to change to a different race, the rules will mostly actually still stay in place for the previous one. So those initial things will actually linger throughout the game and still be in. And actually, depending on if you accomplish or don't accomplish your goals, different cards might end up into the set of cards, because it has a specific condition. If you pass, put these in. If you fail, put these in. So it can change things quite a bit, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool that even if you don't keep them, they can still add a bunch of cards to the deck before they go away, and whatever they've already added to the game just stays. Like, so by the end, you got however many players, very different factions that have evolved over the 3 games, as well as a deck and set of rules specific to how they all came together. It's really interesting. I think another thing, the third era or third round factions all have a instant win condition, and the ones we've seen so far are pretty wild and change everything drastically. How do you feel about those?
Yeah, it's definitely pretty interesting, because basically you're either keeping your old faction and you'll get a ability that lets you score more points, or you're making the decision to go to a new faction that just has an instant win ability through doing a specific thing. And while I found those were pretty interesting, it did lead to some weird situations where like 2 of us were going for an instant win and just kind of didn't care about points that much, whereas the third person that had their race from the round 1 was just focusing on getting points and stopping us, which is definitely a pretty interesting way to play, but it could also mean that people aren't necessarily caring about the victory, the actual like point scoring conditions anymore, which can be a little bit weird.
The one game definitely ended up with 2 of the 3 of us just going for our instant win condition because we were so far back in points that it wasn't at all realistic to win that. And then so the third player just needed to stop them, and thus he also didn't care about points because he was so far ahead of us. I don't really think that's a bad thing because it was fun and interesting, and like I very much enjoyed that play, but it is something that if every game went that way, I think it would probably get old.
Yeah, and I think the instant win conditions aren't just gimmies. You still have to try pretty hard to get them.
Oh yeah.
They can be kind of difficult. The only kind of negative I would say to that is, especially with 3 players, it felt like we were kind of spread out enough that it was difficult for us to like meaningfully interact and stop each other instead of just all kind of doing our own thing, trying to press our own goal.
Yeah, I don't know if that's because we kind of play sort of passively, where we hole up in our own little sectors until we can't, or if that's the game forces that upon us. I'm not really sure how that is either way.
I think it'd be a little bit of both. I think, depending on how your group wants to play it and how many people you play with it, it definitely could be different. I think also part of it, and we can kind of segue into this, the map itself in the campaign is fully open, but it'll be filled with the old empire as well as the blight. And depending on how much that you leave or let that prosper throughout the game, it could really change things up. I think in our one game, that we let the blight spread so much that it made it very difficult to really move around and interact. Whereas a different game that we had, we pretty much eradicated the blight and had free reign to just go wherever we wanted. So I think that's a pretty interesting thing that, it definitely felt different every time, especially with the Empire to, being able to interact with that and use that can change your strategy.
The blight definitely, we've had drastically different games of how the blight plays out. I think the first time we played, we basically eradicated the blight, and so no one was really afraid of it for future games. But then one of the future ones, the blight was just everywhere and a huge nuisance to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The Empire, I kind of feel like just goes away.
I think it kind of depends. I did see you get a choice between a couple races to choose from, and I did see ones that definitely want to take more advantage of that. Mm-hmm. So I think if people choose those, they can try and make the Empire stronger. But I think in most of our games, they've kind of just died off slowly.
I do think that is because of the factions we chose and the way we play more than the game itself forcing that. Another thing with the Empire, I guess not necessarily the Empire, but there's the Kala
the Summit.
Kala Summit, which is everybody has a chance to trade various things, and I think you can trade pretty much anything on the board, but nothing else, basically, something like that. And then at the end, if there's an empire, they do some empire things. That whole part of the campaign felt a little flat to me.
Yeah, I could kind of see that. A lot of the times when the trade got called, we didn't really care to trade. And because of the way where most of the events get set up, you'll end up rolling a dice to see whether crises or edicts happen. So it could just be that we constantly would get crises instead of edicts, where if you do get edicts, that's usually when the government stuff will happen, where, I think early in the game, you'll be taxing everybody, so everybody will lose resources to the Empire, which could be an interesting mechanic, but at the same time, like if you just get unlucky like us, where we just constantly roll crisis, it just doesn't seem to happen.
I think that's also the whole summit and trading and Empire mechanic would probably be more interesting with 4 or 5 people instead of just 3.
Yeah, I think so.
Because when it's 3, if you don't really want to help anybody because everybody's kind of direct competition, there's not a lot of wiggle room for allies and everything.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, it felt like most of the time that we just had what we wanted and didn't want to give it up. So
Yeah.
it was really difficult to make trades. There is a mechanic to kind of forcibly make trades through favors, but it didn't come up that much. There wasn't really a lot of ways to forcibly make favors.
Yeah, it was hard to get them, and giving one willingly seemed like a bad idea. But I think maybe that would, again, I think more players would probably change that, or at least have a chance to change that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and part of that with those edicts, they can do some pretty interesting things. You know, your races will add possible edicts in that will either help or hinder you. And there are ways to forcibly start those by committing resources to calling a summit versus just having it happen through an event. So you can force those to happen, which could be an interesting way to, you know, if you know that's going to mess with people, forcibly call that. So I do think that was an interesting thing. I'd have to play with more people to see really if that comes into play more.
Yeah, I like the idea, just our plays of it, it hasn't meant anything. It's not like bad, it doesn't hurt the game. It was just kind of ignored by in our plays mostly.
Yeah.
Which I'm interested to see what it's like when it isn't, but we haven't had that yet.
So how'd you feel about kind of the just core mechanics of, you know, moving, combat?
It's all fun, interesting, lots of choices. The combat is very lucky, dice driven, so some people don't like that, and if you don't, that's going to be a negative for you, but I enjoy it. The different type of dice you can roll in combat to determine, like, you can roll safer dice, which are less likely to do anything to hit, but it's also less likely to hurt you. You can roll attack dice, which have more damage to the enemy, but also you can hurt yourself. And then there are raid dice, pillage dice, where you can steal cards or resources from people with some of those, and also blow up buildings, or more likely to blow up buildings, and also hurt you. So you can choose your pool of dice that you're going to roll, and I think that's a fun, cool decision. I like it. So if you want to be safe, you can be safe, but you're probably not going to do a lot of damage in the process.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting being able to choose the different dice. And there are some cards that you can pick up to mitigate. So if you do want to go on like a heavy combat, you'll probably be looking to pick up those cards that, you know, let you roll extra dice or reroll dice. And, you know, it is dice rolling, so there's luck, but I didn't feel like it ever really screwed me too hard, or, you know, I got like some miserable outcome. Usually I would get some amount of benefit and some amount of negative, and it might change a little bit, a couple ships maybe extra lost, but overall I kind of felt like it was fair, and I liked it.
Yeah, I don't think I ever won or lost the game because of a dice roll or even a series of dice rolls. You mentioned the card you can pick up there. I think the amount of abilities and special powers that the cards give you is really good. They're a decently big deck, and they all do cool, strong feeling things. A lot of it's super situational, but there's a lot of it, so I like the deck a lot.
Yeah, and it's pretty hard to get cards. You have to commit pretty hard to get them, and you can fight other people to kind of claim those cards, but they all honestly seem worth it. And yeah, they can do some weird, wacky things. You know, especially during the campaign, you'll get ones that will kind of repeatedly come up and cause some weird things during the crises. So definitely thought that was a fun mechanic, and changed up a lot of, you know, how to play.
Yeah, it's really good. One thing with the campaign to mention, it has a catch-up mechanic, I guess. Between each round, if you have positive points, you lose half your points. So that kind of does a good job at trying to keep it within reach for everybody. And then, like I said, we talked about earlier, the third round factions having an instant win condition to go for. If you're just so far in the dumpster on points, you can always just go hard for that and still have a chance. So you never feel like you're just totally out of the game. And that's for a 6-7 hour, three game campaign, that's pretty pivotal, I think. And I think it does a really good job of it.
Yeah, I never really felt like I was completely out of it, even if I knew I had a couple bad rounds. It felt like I could kind of pivot, or at least like focus on building myself up to have a better later game. I think all the campaigns that we've played have really been tight, coming down to the end, where it's come down to the last turn to determine who won.
Yeah.
So I do very much like that in that regard. But like you did say, this is, if you're playing the campaign, could be 7-8 hours, especially if you're not familiar with the rules. It can take a lot of extra time.
Yeah, I think our first run through of the campaign, which 3 of us never having done the campaign, was at least 8 hours, maybe a little more.
Yeah, and even the base game rules will take quite a bit of time to get through, and you throw it on top of campaign rules, and then the rules for each faction that you might have, and then extra rules between games. It can really add up.
Yeah.
So it's just something to keep in mind, that if you're looking to play this, you might want to either schedule out a whole day, or there is a way to save the games in between, using basically gives you some trays that you can put the pieces in. That way you can just set it back up. We haven't done it like that, but it is a nice option if you're don't necessarily have 8 hours to spend on a single campaign.
After our first one, we haven't hit 8 hours again, I don't think. So it does get better when you know what you're doing and are used to it more. I don't think it would. I think it would. The save would probably work well and not like ruin your flow or anything.
No, yeah,
you might kind of forget like what your exact goals are, but they're going to be on your cards, so you can just read them again and stuff. I don't think it's. So I think the save system would work fine and probably not be a huge pain to set up or anything if you wanted to do that way.
Yeah, I think so.
Anything else?
No, I think that was all for me. So you want to get into scores?
Yeah. So I don't know if I would score the base game this high, but the campaign, I think for me, is a 9 out of 10. I love it. Everything about it is fun to me. It clicks. It's what I want. There's some good chaos, very fun decisions within players. All the core systems are great as well. The factions that change everything up every time and throughout each round of the game, all very cool. Really like this game.
Yep, I think I would give it an 8. I really like this game as well. It's felt different every time we played, and there's just a ton of different fun stuff you can do. The whole mechanic with the trick taking is something that I feel like I haven't seen done in that way. So definitely pretty cool. And just the whole style and vibe of the game, I think, is pretty awesome. I would only give it some down just because some finickiness with the rules and explaining all that. But if you can get past that, I think it's a pretty awesome game.
We definitely spend a lot of time in the rule book in the campaign one at least.
Yeah, so that is ARCS. You can check it out. There's also a Kickstarter up right now for a new expansion to bring more players and more abilities to the game. So a good way to pick it up. Check it out if you like Cole, and that's all from us.
Bye.
See ya.